Hi educators and welcome to Storytime with Kate. Today I was going to introduce you a document that may be very helpful, especially if you are just learning how to do observations. Quite often when we start the career in early childhood education and care, we do not have the language that is required for analysis, observations, writing, planning, and programming. Programming as a skill requires a lot of years to develop, and we need mentors, but we also need practice. Before all that, it might be a good idea to use props or examples. So this is how I learned to do observations by using EYLF or Early Years Learning Framework. But last year, this resource was published by the Department of Education in Victoria. And even if you are not in Victoria, you might find the language very professional and very useful. The most important thing about this resource that it shows how to do this cycle of planning. So let's have a look at some examples. So first, it's very important for early childhood educators to have very good understanding of EYLF vision, principles, practices. Because it's Victorian framework, we have practice principles instead of different principles and separate practices, but the outcomes or learning outcomes for children would be the same. As you can see, we have 5 learning outcomes. It's identity, community, well-being, communication, learning. So identity is similar to EYLF outcome. Children have a strong sense of identity. Community is a key word to remember. Children are connected with and contribute to the world. And well-being, children have a strong sense of well-being. Communication, children are effective communicators. Learning, children are confident and involved learners. Quite often what I notice that educators who are working in the field and students who are finishing their placement tick these boxes and link the outcomes, but they don't have a good understanding of the planning cycle, or they don't really understand what these outcomes mean. Of course, with good knowledge, you can link a lot of outcomes and sub-outcomes to the learning experience. But quite often what I notice that this connection, it is not very good, or it's random. So let's have a look how this resource demonstrates the importance of using this professional document, in our case Victorian framework, and this planning cycle. So as you can see, in the middle of the planning cycle is a unique context of your service. Whether you are family daycare educator, or you are working in early childhood education and care or daycare, or you're working in kindergarten or after school, before school care, it doesn't matter. You do have a context which is unique for your service. So you have a very unique set of families, very unique educators, language diversity, cultural diversity. You might be a rural center, or you might have placement in a city center. So this context is very, very important for planning, because it should inform all the planning, and it should be reflected in how you collect information, how you question and analyze it, how you plan for experiences. Also, it's about how you implement the experiences and reflect and review them. So as you can see, this cycle introduces 5 important stages of planning. Number 1 is collect information here. So my students, when they're on placement, they start with all about me form, where they discuss some important information about the child. They gather it or collect it from the parents or families, from educators, and also through observations of the child. Usually for certificate 3, they have to observe at least 3 children of different ages. And when you are moving towards diploma and start to work as a diploma student, you are observing groups of children. So this collection stage is very, very important. So educator records evidence of child's engaging in activities, about child's learning, or any important information that is relevant for future planning. Next stage is question and analyze. So in some other books, it might be called interpretation. Yeah. So when you actually look at the information you collected and you ask yourself, what? Yeah, what does it tell me about the child? What does it tell me about child interests? What does it tell me about his learning, about his skills, or what child already knows and what the child might be ready to learn next? Here, you are using all your understanding of theories, your professional experience, and your very, very objective knowledge of child's learning. Okay? At this stage, you can easily use EYLF and this Victorian framework for using the keywords for your analysis. For example, you can highlight phrases from EYLF that they do resonate with you, or they do reflect the learning that you observed. And I'll show you how in the next video. So here, let's look at planning stage or plan. Once you observed something, you noticed that child is learning, let's say, to tie their shoelaces or interested in puzzles and ready to move to the next step, you are planning for the next experience. And this is when you consider what kind of concepts you are going to introduce or specific vocabulary. How are you going to model and scaffold further knowledge through open-ended questions? How you can make this experience meaningful, yeah? How are you going to set it up? So this is a planning stage that requires a lot of thinking, including reflections on analysis and on observations. You also think about your context during this step. So next step is when you set up and deliver experience, or you set up an activity and run it. For example, if I planned storytelling session, I would prepare all my resources, all my prompts, and will plan how I'm going to approach it. I'm going to start with this song. I'm going to draw the attention to these questions. I'm going to pass around the puppets, and then we will have next step, and then at the end I will leave children with puppets to play and explore. Okay? During reflection stage, this is the 5th step, you will reflect how did you go. So for example, I usually sit down and write in my tiny journal or diary that experience was a little bit messy or not organized, or I could use a little bit less time because it was too long, or children started to get distracted, or the vocabulary I used was not very child-friendly, or I could explain it a little bit better. Children with additional needs needed more support. Maybe next time I will use fidget toys, etc. So you evaluate on your teaching skills, you evaluate your teaching skills, you reflect on your performance as a teacher, basically, and also how children were involved. If children were not involved, it's fine to write it down honestly. Quite often teachers do have to do it because they didn't actually meet the outcomes and the experience was actually meh, right? As you can see, the next stage goes back. Why? Because a lot of times we set up experience based on child's needs or learning or interests, and then once we finished the first experience, we can add something to it and we start collecting information again. So this cycle is not happening once. Usually it goes on and on and on. And this is what assessors want to see. So that's about cycle. The next video will be about how to use this cycle for your planning based on the examples that we will look at.